Rosalind Carter reminds us there are only 4 kinds of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who currently are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. Join us for Life Journeys, Solutions for Caregivers.
Major funding for this program is provided by the John R. Oishei Foundation, a catalyst for change, produced in partnership with the American Red Cross Greater Buffalo Chapter, dedicated to helping people lead safe and healthy lives.
Today, many of us struggle to take better care of our elderly and most ill.
I have to take care of her. It's my wife. Been married 40 years. And just because she's sick now, I won't abandon her.
She did so much for me all my years.
Uno por la mañana y una por la noche. Una por la mañana.
You know, it's time for me to give back what she gave me.
I'm Susan Hunt, and in the years that I cared for my mom, I suffered the stress, guilt, and loneliness that most caregivers feel. But I also learned so much. It was an experience that changed my life.
The doctor said drink water so you don't get dehydrated. Everybody pitches in, grandkids, anybody. If you're a friend that walks in, if it's time to do something, you do something. But it's got to be a family affair because you can't do it by yourself. There's no way.
Every year, more than 50 million American families cope with the challenges of this growing problem. In this program, we invite you to join our conversation as we share ideas on enriching your caregiving journey. I'm joined here at the kitchen table by Bill and Miriam and Bruce, and guys, I can't think of a better place to start this conversation than at a kitchen table.
Absolutely.
Because actually, it's where my caregiving journey began. That's the truth. Now, Miriam, I'm going to start with you because your job is to help caregivers, but I want to start with your personal experience because I know you had one.
For sure. I was an only child. My parents were older. My dad died suddenly, and shortly thereafter, Mom got sick, went in the hospital. When it was time for her to be discharged, she was told that she couldn't go home. It wasn't safe for her to be alone, and she had to either go to a facility or home with me. Well, she didn't like either of those choices, and she reluctantly came home with me, although she assured me it was only temporary. Well, it was 7 years, and she ended her life at my house.
So it was 7 years, and you know, oftentimes we have no idea when we begin this journey how long it's going to take, do we?
Absolutely not. We discovered that my wife had Alzheimer's disease when she was only 56. That's 18 years ago. She's still alive in a nursing home. Mm-hmm. But we had had a prelude to that. Her mother and her mother's brother had Alzheimer's disease. That was diagnosed. We think her grandfather may have. But the long journey of those 18 years has been very hard on all of us. Mm-hmm. And you know what, Bill, continues.
It seems that when I started as a caregiver, I thought I was all alone. In fact, I didn't really talk about it much. I was kind of awkward and embarrassed. And then when I finally got up the nerve to say, I'm sorry, I can't go out with you at night because I'm caring for my mother, all of a sudden somebody else said, oh, well, so am I. And then this person said it, and I realized I really wasn't alone. But there are a lot of people out there dealing with this.
Well, I think Americans in general are living longer. Mm-hmm. And we have the whole baby boom, which is going to be the largest growing, fastest growing aging population ever in this country. And so it's a very important issue that we need to address.
And or families are different. Mm-hmm. Right? It used
Absolutely.
to be my family, the older generations, they cared for their elders at home because my mom
Everybody lived in the same
work.
town, too.
Exactly. And now people are scattered all over the country and they're working full time, mm-hmm. and there's just a whole lot of different dynamics.
Well, there's no question that caring for our aging population, it's not only a social issue, but in many ways, it's almost becoming epidemic. And if we don't take care of it right now and deal with these issues and get prepared, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
And to look at these issues before we're in crisis. Research and statistics back that up, and yet people don't know where to start. They don't know where to turn for help. We need to get the word out there.
For me, it was a gradual thing. because Joe didn't have a stroke. He had very, very slowly, he started becoming debilitated. It was not an overnight thing.
You know, Miriam, I think we can't emphasize enough the part of being a good caregiver is, first of all, understanding you're a caregiver early on.
And so many people don't. I get calls from people saying, well, I help my mother out, I do this and this and this, but I don't know if it really qualifies me as a caregiver. Yeah, it does. If you're doing anything to help someone, you mow the lawn or you drive someone to a doctor's appointment, you're a caregiver, and you don't have to be a blood relative. It's that you're helping another person. And people say, well, I'm just doing what a daughter ought to do, I guess, but you're a caregiver.
So, siéntate aquí. Mamá actual que te voy a dar.
I always had a second mother, and that's my aunt. I would visit her every day when she would get out of work, and she would always have my favorite cereal waiting for me. She spoiled me, to tell you the truth. So it kind of hit me when she had to go in for her open heart surgery about 3 to 4 years ago. I was like, wow, it is me. I'm the one who's got to take care of her now. Take one tablet 2 times a day. So you're going to put one. This is what I've been doing for I don't know how many years now. Coming every day, just as I was when I was a child, checking up on her now, making sure if she needs anything.
And you know, oftentimes it's subtle. It starts with 1 or 2 hours a week, and then the next thing you know, it's 7 hours. The next thing you know, it's 10 hours. You're missing work. You know, and I can't stress enough to you guys. I think when you're a caregiver, you want to do it right. You want to make it perfect for that person that you're caring for. And let's face facts. In this particular journey, perfection is not something that you can attain. Am I right? But how can we? What are other ways that we can be better caregivers?
Well, one of the big things that people have to do is take care of themselves, because caregivers are notorious for neglecting their own health, whether it's their mental health or their physical health, because they put the well-being of their loved one first.
It's very true. I end up administering estates for the caregiver sometimes before the person who was receiving and needing the care because of exhaustion.
That is really scary. I want to get back to Bill, because you know your story, again, you've cared for your wife who has Alzheimer's, and you've been caring for her for 18 years.
That's right.
How has this impacted your life? Tell us more about yourself.
In the beginning, it was little things I had to do. I had to worry about the lost keys or the misplaced document or whatever. It grew without my realizing it was growing, the caregiving. I just decided to take a half-time job instead of a full-time job. I was over 60, I could do that. And it meant being around the house because of safety problems, leaving on the burners, doing things that could be dangerous to her or to us.
It must have taken a terrible toll on you. But did you know it was taking a toll on you?
No, that was the problem. I think that some of my friends, but particularly my children, began to realize that speech patterns, talking to them on the phone, the stress was causing me to have memory problems.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I couldn't remember names. I couldn't remember dates of appointments, that sort of thing. I got into the habit of making lists all the time because I was suffering from that.
Yeah, but wait a minute. At the time this was going on, you thought you were handling it.
Oh, I thought I could do it all by myself. And they conspired to get me to think otherwise, actually get out of the house we were in. It was inappropriate. It was very large.
Did you leave without kicking?
Oh, no. They helped me decide.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
no question. And it was a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Bruce, is this a typical story? Do you hear this all the time?
It is sadly a typical story. Although, you know, I have to say, I'd like to hear it more often, because what you're really hearing here is that people were planning ahead and people were intervening and people were doing something before the crisis Miriam mentioned came about. Because the story that may be more typical is the last minute story. The adult child calling me on Thursday night, flying into town on Friday, trying to take care of everything before they leave town again on Sunday night to be back at work on Monday.
And there's no way you're going to be able to do that.
And there isn't any way you can do that.
And Miriam?
Another advantage to the early intervention is that you may be more likely to get cooperation from your family member if it's a smaller change than if it's a large change. And also, it may save you money to start putting in some services earlier on rather than when we're already in that crisis situation.
Well, I know the nurses say to me, preventing the first fall is the most important thing.
Sure.
You know, and that's not just true for the falls probably, but for the financial planning and for where you're going to live and all of that kind of thing. You have more options and you have a greater chance of independence and control if you plan ahead.
I think it was New Year's Day in 2000, we got a call from Lorain, Ohio, where my mother and father lived, and my mother was sick and she was refusing to go to the hospital. So my sister and I just got in the car and drove down there.
Who was that right there?
Ned.
I never thought about being a caregiver. Just that was my mother and that was my father, and we were taking care of them.
Miriam, when you know somebody in your life is going to need care, how do you prepare?
Well, you need to figure out what help that person's going to need and who's going to provide that help, whether it's formal supports that you pay for or informal supports like friends and family. And one of the best ways to look at those issues is the family meeting.
And it's really important to have everybody there because you're going to need everybody to buy into it, whether they're actively participating daily or participating infrequently from afar, what have you, but you need the buy-in.
There's a list of things that have to be addressed, but you have to get that list at that meeting. You have to have it in front of you, and it's just 1, 2,
Well, and
3.
that's where having somebody, a neutral third party or a professional or a friend or somebody who can help you stay on track and help you be organized and help you make sure you're getting to all the right issues.
I thought maybe today we could just talk about some additional challenges and kind of see what's come up.
If Joe's in the room and I'm not, where's Rose? So it's like the shadowing has started. And at night, it's hard for her to settle down and go to sleep.
We worry she's going to fall down the stairs.
Oh, yeah,
We
she's got
bathroom
osteoporosis.
Yeah, it's like...
Joe, you've had some health issues come up. Have you ever talked about maybe having her relocate to another sibling's home?
I think that would be very traumatic for her because even though she doesn't really know where she lives sometimes, she does know where her bathroom is upstairs, she knows where her room is, and she's got everything all set.
But the other thing too is you don't have to address everything at one family meeting.
That's right.
You may say, okay, we're going to look at financial issues at this meeting, or you may say we have to look at home care issues at this meeting. You do one thing at a time and you prioritize.
What happens if that elderly person in your life, that mother, father, grandparent, they don't want to know anything about this. They don't want to talk to any outside source. Moreover, they don't even want you to get together and have that family meeting. What do you do? Because it happens.
It does happen, and again, that's where the professional coming in can often get cooperation, where I was just the daughter. What did I know? I was just the little snot-nosed kid.
Right.
But a professional, on the other hand, there may be enough respect there. It could be their clergymen that they've had a relationship with for years.
So let's talk about ways, if you're not the primary caregiver, that you can help that person. And I'm talking about helping the caregiver now. What are some ways that people can contribute?
One of the things that we tell family members, especially if they don't live in town and they say, I'd do something if I were there, but I'm not there, I'm out of state, send money and maybe pay for babysitting for your sister to free her up to do certain things. Or how about purchasing some adaptive equipment that's going to make the caregiving easier for the primary caregiver who's in town?
Well, I know I took over some of the financial management because the paperwork could be done, mailing addresses could be changed so that things came to me and I could take care of them. And that was something that didn't have to be on site, so to speak.
And even if you're not part of the family, if you're a friend or a relative, you can certainly step in and offer to do a number of things, whether it's shopping. I'll take your parent to the doctor's appointment. I'll offer driving services for the next 2 or 3 weeks so you can stay on a schedule with your work.
I think more and more of the national organizations, Cancer Society, Alzheimer's, the Heart Association, talk about respite. And it's a very real word. And it would have been helpful for me in those early years before the heart began to really show the stress if I had had some knowledge and some understanding about ways in which I could use my family members or non-family members to provide me with 2 or 3 days away from the situation.
Bruce, as we go along this caregiving journey, what are some of the legal tools and documents that we need to have in place?
Well, those tools are called advanced directives. And I would probably say there are 3 that come to mind immediately. One is a healthcare proxy. And the healthcare proxy is a person you choose and you trust and you communicate your wishes to about how you feel about medical treatments or what kind of medical treatments you do want or don't want.
Let me just say that when Bruce spoke to us, we didn't have an appropriate healthcare proxy. We had something called a living will, which was more of a statement of belief and why we felt that death was part of life and so on. And he helped us get conformed to the New York State requirements, in this case, regarding a healthcare proxy and the naming of someone and so on.
All right, well, we've got a bunch of work to do today. I want to start with your healthcare proxies. The law requires that if you want your agent to be able to make decisions about artificial nutrition and hydration, that's tube feeding, you need to be specific about that in the document. The new paragraph is right here, and it specifically and expressly says that you're authorizing your wife and you're authorizing your husband to access, use, and disclose protected health information. I'm going to send you home with 5 copies, because those don't do any good if people don't know about them. So you need to be sure that you give a copy to your doctor and to whoever else you think you would like to know about this. The durable general power of attorney is the other one, and the two are really sort of a pair in my mind. It's durable because it stays in effect even if you become incapacitated. And it's general because what you're doing is the person you trust, the person you pick, has got general powers to do anything that you could do if you were there. Real estate, banking, taxes, anything you could imagine, literally. That's why it's a general power. And those two together, when you've got them, means that the people you picked and trust can help you manage your affairs, which is better than if you don't have them, because we're going to be going to court and having a guardian appointed by a judge, and that's far more expensive, and you're less likely to have your wishes perhaps be as well known or enforced. What you'll need to do is put your 3 initials in this box right here.
Okay.
We're going to put these in the vault. You don't want these circulating around. This is a kind of a document. The power is in effect now. Someone could potentially use it the wrong way.
Bruce, does this document have an expiration date?
It does. Power of attorney is only in effect as long as you live. So when you're gone, it's gone too. Same is true with the healthcare proxy form. The third advanced directive in this caregiving context has become so important is the Hipaa authorization form. And Hipaa is a law that was passed in the late 90s to do a variety of things. And one of those things it was intended to do was protect the privacy of our medical information, which is an important thing, but it also acts as a barrier.
Absolutely.
And it prevents the person, or it can sometimes prevent the person that you've chosen to help you from accessing or using or disclosing your medical information. So with your health insurance company especially, but probably with the human resources people at your employer, and maybe with your doctor, maybe with your pharmacist. I mean, it varies from person to person, healthcare provider to healthcare provider. They all have their own Hipaa authorization form.
Yeah, what's funny is we've been talking about all these documents, but the one thing we haven't talked about is a will. What about a will?
Well, a will is important. And it can be very important in the caregiving situation. Normally we think of wills as taking care of your stuff after you're dead and gone. And that's what wills really do. But in the caregiving scenario, it's especially important because what you may be trying to do as the caregiver spouse who's going to pass away first is do some things, get some things in place to protect your needy spouse that's going to continue to need care after you're gone. So depending upon your personal situation, a will can also be a very important type of caregiving tool and advanced directive.
Will any lawyer do?
Let me say here that from experience can tell you you need to deal with an attorney who specializes in elder law issues.
Why are you saying that?
because they know the current situation, they understand what you're going through, they're familiar with the documents, they know, and I've heard Bruce say, I counsel people. He can lead them through the maze of information and forms.
And there's a specialization. You know, there's different kinds of law, and there's vast amounts of rules and knowledge that you have to, and that's why I have partners, because there's things that I don't do, and I turn those over to my partners. But I have chosen to focus on the elder law issues, so I understand Medicare statutes and Medicaid statutes and insurance statutes and those kinds of things.
And you deal with it every day. It's like having a pediatrician do brain surgery. I mean, I think
or a pediatrician take care of a geriatric patient. If my experience day after day after day is seeing certain kinds of problems and finding certain kinds of solutions, then those are the ones that I can be most creative with and most flexible with.
But I can feel something here, and it's, I can just hear it, people thinking, it's going to cost so much money. I mean...
Oh, it costs even more, let me say. I've dealt with too many situations in which it costs a lot more in terms not only of finances, but in terms of emotional stress, in terms of the kinds of bad will that's left afterwards if you don't have the problems resolved in advance.
What other things do we really need to have on hand? I mean, you've mentioned a number of documents. What other things do we need to pay attention to?
Well, I'll
jump right in.
I'll interject one right away. I think long-term care insurance is a major factor. I had a heart attack when I was 51 and then bypass surgery, and I was very worried about what was going to happen to my family and to my wife. And so when she was a teacher, and when the union offered long-term care insurance, we bought in for me. And it turns out that here, years later, we have her under the long-term care insurance. And we were very fortunate.
You know, you bring up such a good point, because care is expensive. It doesn't matter whether it lasts, you know, a month, 18 years, the numbers are astronomical. So in many ways, I think in this day and age, you know, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't have long-term care insurance. Miriam, in your business, why is it that you think people just don't want to talk about these kinds of things and don't want to deal with them and designate people and get it all out of the way?
Well, it's a very difficult conversation for people to have because, as Bruce mentioned, it can be about end-of-life wishes, and people don't want to talk about that. They don't want to face the fact that mom and dad are going to pass away, that they themselves are not immortal, and bringing this question up, this topic up, it never seems like there's a good time. And that's something that we work with caregivers, raising the difficult conversations with your parents.
And I think that Miriam is right on point, that there's a sense, the younger you are, unfortunately, is a sense of that immortality, it's not going to happen to me kind of thing. And I think that we have to be more natural about being willing among family and friends to raise those issues.
You know what I'm taking away from this conversation is that, yes, caregiving is a journey, but it is absolutely unique to every individual that goes through it. My experience is different from yours. And, you know, I would like to ask each one of you, if we could offer up one piece of advice, personal advice, and I'll start with you, Bill, what would that be?
I think as a primary caregiver, in my case, I think that it's really necessary to accept and recognize the value of anybody else's contribution to the caregiving effort. Not to judge or evaluate or denigrate in any way the caregiving they're willing to offer, but to accept it because certain people have limitations, certain people emotionally have limitations, find it hard to do it, but whatever is offered, I think we have to accept as an expression of goodwill and their love for the person who we mutually love as we give our caregiving.
That is a great piece of advice. Bruce, what about you?
Well, be prepared. Get together with the people who are important to you and talk about these important issues and get those documents in place.
And Miriam?
I would say caregivers need to take care of themselves, and one way to do that is to use the information in the resources that are out there. Caregivers aren't alone. Use the help that's available.
You know, it's funny, I was going to add my piece of advice, but I think I would just say ditto, because I really believe that you need to know you're not alone. And once you recognize that, and once you recognize that you're starting on this journey, there are all sorts of things that can be opened up to you, and help is there if you're willing to go out and get it. So I guess my piece of advice would be, take care of yourself, don't let the stress get you down, reach out, and chances are the help will be there. Incredible conversation. I'm really glad to have joined you here at the kitchen table. I noticed that not one of us touched these. That just means you'll have to come back. But I can't thank you enough. Everybody's information, personal experiences, I'm just very grateful for you sharing them.
Thank you.
Now, on our next program, we're going to talk more specifically about hands-on day-to-day challenges that caregivers face. So be sure to look for that. I'm Susan Hunt, and I thank you very much for watching.
I've always wondered what I could give back to my parents for helping me out a lot. And it's helped me to help them.
The reward is knowing that I'm succeeding in spite of all I'm up against.
I think through it all, we found a place out of necessity to come together and say, together we can do a lot of things. Separately, we're sunk.
They're not going to be here long, you know, so do what you got to do. Do as much as you can.
Just have that self-confidence. You really have to have that. You really have to say, I can do it.
Major funding for this program is provided by the John R. Oishei Foundation, a catalyst for change.
There are a lot of things you learn on the journey of being a caregiver. I know when I was going through the process, I thought I was the only one out there. And you know, you find yourself going through a myriad of emotions. Anger, frustration, hopelessness. But then there are times when you succeed, when you make that individual's life a little bit better. What I think this program can do is bring this whole topic out into the open.